Hello, once again, welcome to Process Automation Release Notes. This time we are going to talk about version 5.2. And as always, we have Jake and Forrest with us. How are you guys doing today?
Doing
Can't
great.
complain.
Doing great.
Cool. So today's live stream is on version 5.2 of Process Automation. So what's new on this new version?
Right. So the 5.2 version is very much about getting out our brooms and our trash cans, maybe, and cleaning up around the run deck land. We spent a bunch of time and effort revamping our test framework. So this is all very much kind of on the back end, but it's going to greatly increase our ability to make sure the releases are being tested thoroughly. There is actually a plan, a little bit longer term plan. We're not quite ready yet, but to try and also put that out to customers and users so that or at least educate on it so that you could write your own tests using that test framework. As we get farther along in the project, we'll be doing that. But yeah, a lot of the time on 5.2 was spent rewriting tests, making sure the framework was solid, as well as the hackers have been busy out there in internet land, and that results in our teams being busy fending off those attacks. Right, it's the perpetual security game, fixing CVEs and other security related items. So very much a kind of a maintenance release. We fixed quite a few other bugs, and in lieu of that, I think we were going to spend some time also today talking a little bit about plugin development in general. Jake, I know you've been working on some new Kubernetes plugins, so maybe we spend a little time talking about that, and then some ideas or how the community might approach writing their own plugins.
Yeah, that would be great. And I was recently in KubeCon in Paris, and there were a lot of questions from several customers and potentially future customers where they were asking us about like integration with Kubernetes. So seeing this work that you guys have been doing is definitely interesting for a lot more people.
Tiago, I thought we talked about they're not supposed to go to Paris without Jake and I.
Yeah, next time. Yeah. Okay, guys.
There
So,
we are.
Jake, stage is yours.
Yeah. So, what I'm about to show are a suite of new Kubernetes plugins, and they're in call it a closed beta state. So, if you're an existing PagerDuty process or roadmap automation customer, and you want to try these out, we can get them into your hands so you can pressure test them with us and for us. So what you're looking at here is the inventory model, and what you'll notice perhaps is that some of these nodes are called something like cluster or EKS and K8s. And so what we're actually looking at are Kubernetes clusters added as nodes to the node inventory. And what this has been done through our new node source plugin specifically for EKS and AKS. Don't worry, none of these are secret values. These are just the client ID and subscription ID. But what it's allowed us to do is to dynamically pick up EKS and AKS clusters and add them to the node inventory. The credentials for these can be used from the AWS or the Azure plugin group. So you could set the credentials for these at the project or system level. As a matter of fact, we have for these. And so what that means is that if your team is regularly spinning up new clusters, these node source plugins will pick them up much in the way that we pick up our EC2 instances through the EC2 instance plugin. Now, that's one side of the coin here. So a couple of new resource model plugins to dynamically pick these up. But what is perhaps more engaging and more interesting is a collection of new job step plugins that can connect to and integrate with the workloads running on the clusters, but use the fact that Ramagor Process Automation has credentials to talk to the cloud provider as a means for authenticating with the Kubernetes cluster itself. So what you'll see is that this job step plugin doesn't have a place to put in your kube config or your Kubernetes token, anything like that. This is a node step plugin that will target one of those cluster nodes, and it recognizes that that is a cluster that's been discovered by this resource model plugin and can use the credentials provided to the resource model plugin or to the AWS or Azure plugin group, and use that to talk to the cloud provider to get the credentials to actually talk to the cluster. And so this is really where the value is, because it allows for, again, customers to have clusters that are dynamically being discovered, regularly being spun up, and they don't, the customers don't have to do anything in our product in order to make sure that we can actually authenticate and talk to those new clusters. Whereas our legacy plugins in this area, require that customers add a kube config for each cluster that they wanted to operate on. The last piece of this that I'll highlight is that for these node step plugins as well, we offer an additional form of authenticating with the clusters, and that is to place our enterprise runner into the clusters as a pod, and use the service account that's associated with that pod to give it the permissions to operate on the workloads running in the clusters. And so that's what this little checkbox is, and you can set it at the node source level. So if I did this here, then all of those EKS clusters that were discovered would tell Process Automation that, hey, there's a runner running in these clusters, and that's the way that you can authenticate and operate on the clusters. This just adds a node attribute, so you could set this on a per cluster basis. Doesn't need to be for the entire EKS integration. And so this, ultimately allows for a much simpler, easier setup. This is using the local runner, so we should be able to run this now. I haven't run it in a little while, so we'll see what happens here. Great. So this is actually a combination of an EKS cluster. So that's what we did here, is we listed the pods, and we asked it for JSON format output. And then we did it also for our AKS cluster. There's no pods returned here because you may have seen that in the job definition, I was actually filtering on pods with a particular app label. But this demonstrates how easy it is to now target, clusters running in multiple cloud environments, and the authentication with those clusters is now dynamic. So a much easier overall Kubernetes automation experience.
Yeah, definitely. This seems a lot easier than the the like legacy job steps that I used while building my demos on Kubernetes. So this is pretty cool to see. So at this point in time, I see we have this integration with EKS and AKS specifically. Are we going to open up for other providers, or are we going to have something, a bit more generic for people that decide to host their own Kubernetes?
Yeah, good question. So so the native integrations that we have are today for AWS and Azure for EKS and AKS. But when we do release these, it will have an option for generic as well, so that you can, there wouldn't be a cloud provider auth mechanism, but you could still use the pod, the runner as a pod service account method for authenticating. And then yes, we'll expand it later on to GKE, right? Google's equivalent. So the other thing I'll mention here, maybe this is actually a good segue to talking about plugin development, is that the legacy Kubernetes plugins that we have are written in Python, and they're open source. And while that's great, it does add a dependency for customers that they install Python and then the specific Kubernetes library for Python in order for our legacy plugins to work. And our platform is not written in Python, so that's why it's an extra step there for customers for setup. And this becomes especially cumbersome if you want to use our enterprise runner as a container to use those plugins. You then have to add those dependencies and create your own container image based off of our enterprise runner container. So it's just a lot of hoops to hop through, and so this gets rid of those dependencies. These plugins are written in Groovy, which is it's effectively Java. And so that's maybe the segue to talk about the other piece here, which is around plugin development. We have this tool out in our open source Rundeck GitHub org called Plugin Bootstrap. Many open source users I know are aware of it, but there are many people who are unaware of it. And what it allows you to do is it's a command line tool that allows you to create plugin templates for all of these plugin types. And it has options for both script-based plugins and Java-based plugins. And so what we've also been doing behind the scenes is revamping this developer tool to make it so that all of the Java plugins are more rich in terms of what the template provides when it's created, but also follows our more up-to-date plugin development standards. Using things like plugin annotations that makes creating the actual plugin properties a lot easier, and includes examples of like how to retrieve a secret from key storage as part of the plugin. And so this work has been going on here. There's an open PR, and so if anybody wants to try out the most up to date kind of where we're headed with this developer tool, anyone can go ahead and check out this PR. But I can do a quick, just a quick demo here that demonstrates kind of what is possible at the command line. I may have to change. I just realized I probably have to change my which screen I'm sharing.
Yeah, it's fine. I just shared the link to the GitHub project on the chat. So for anyone that wants to explore this plugin Bootstrap that Jake is sharing, you can do that. Yeah.
Let's see. Present share screen. Chrome has lost permissions to capture your screen. Well, I can either restart Chrome and have to rejoin the meeting, or don't you just love this? Or we can.
It always happens live, right?
Skip it.
Yeah.
Tiago, what would you prefer? Should I just rejoin in a second?
Well, if you are confident enough that that's going to work, let's do that.
Yeah. All right. I'll be right back.
Cool. And Forrest, this is basically the work that you guys have been doing around like improving the developer experience and making sure that plugins are easier to develop, is basically because you are looking for like more community-based plugins, more people contributing.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Like what many people might not know is some of our most used plugins have come from the community. So the Ansible plugin was started by someone. Eventually, we adopted that, formally. They were actually happy to let it go because it had so much activity and traction, and we folded that in. I think our original Kubernetes plugins started on open source. Like a lot of these great ideas come from the community, right? They're where the work is happening, and they're the ones that have the next idea. So a recent story, our somewhere mid 4.x series, we released the ROI plugins just to track some ROI on jobs. We recently had a customer write a UI plugin, right? And there's a lot of attention put on the job step plugins and sometimes node source plugins, but there's a lot more plugin types than I think people often realize. So this particular customer wrote a UI plugin. It gave them a whole dashboard of ROI metrics inside their Rundeck instance that, worked for them, solved, all kinds of reporting problems, not problems. I think it actually carried the reporting forward of they didn't have any, insight into their ROI before. And that is something that we're absolutely looking at carrying forward and formalizing, right? We hadn't put it together, in our own heads that way, but now that we see it, when we see that lead, myself, my team is able to carry that to the next step. So we maybe towards the end, we'll bring up the list of all the different types of plugins, that we have, do a quick scan through that, but looks like Jake's back and hopefully demo ready.
Hopefully we got technical issues sorted out. All right, let's see this here. Okay.
There you go.
Big black screen. So I'm in the.
Can you just increase the font a little bit, Jake? Yeah, there you go. Thank you.
All right, you able to see that?
Yeah.
All right, so this is the command line tool for the Rundeck plugin bootstrap, and you can see that here's the flags that I ought to use, and so I can, what I can do is just say, I'll hide this. There we go. So I can say, this is a, my new plugin, and I can say it's a, what are we going to create here? We could create a, just a workflow step, and we'll create a Java, and we'll create it in my downloads directory. Cool, right? And so now if we check this out, we have our plugin, and the source code would be right there. And so I can open this up to show everyone. But inevitably what we've been working on is that the plugin itself, the plugin code now follows, like I said, all of these new standards, and ideally these new templates guide users to do more than they did before. So I'll see if the resolution size of my IDE isn't that big either. So this might be a little hard to see, but let me change the screen one more time here. Can you see this, or is this super small?
Pretty small.
Okay. All right. Well, in that case, I won't go too deep into it. But at the end of the day, these templates make it easier for those who are new to plugin development to get started. As you can see here, there's a lot of comments in the code explaining what each part of the plugin is, and explaining how, what's expected and how to do proper logging. As I mentioned, how to retrieve secrets from key storage. And we particularly focused on our again, the Java plugin types, because that's where there's more functionality that can be built into the plugins than our script-based plugins. And we know that many users it's pretty easy to get started with writing plugins in a scripting language that customers are familiar with, and there's a little bit of a barrier to entry for writing Groovy or Java plugins. And so that's why we've invested here, is to make it so that those who are not familiar with Java or Groovy can go down that path and take advantage of all of the rich features that can be built into plugins using that language. And so back to the plugins that we just showed the Kubernetes plugin suite. Those were written in Java. As by virtue of doing that, we're able to take advantage of things like the cloud authentication to be able to talk to the cluster, or use the pod service account from the runner. Those things would be a little bit more difficult to do using the script-based plugins. But yeah, Forrest mentioned, the long list of plugin types that we have. And I definitely think it's worth pulling those up here. This,
so they're sharing on the screen now, I think.
Perfect.
Right, so there's quite a few different types of plugins. The Kubernetes plugins that Jake was just mentioning are listed as these resource model plugins. There's file copiers. There's notifications, right? What to do when a job is completed. A whole lot of different types here. The UI plugins is another common one. You can use this to change the look and feel. You can change colors. You can add things to pages. You can even build out, as I mentioned before, more complicated views of different data. So there's quite a few different plugins. This is also the place, I believe, to get started with plugin development. So it will walk you through, how to approach writing certain plugins. And then if you are curious what plugins are out there and available, this is our open source, plugin repository. So these are, out there and visible to the public. It is at github.run-plugins.com. Both these links, Tiago, I'm not watching the chat, but I sent them to you in Slack. So there's, for example, this is the Ansible plugin. This is the code base for the Ansible plugin that's included in the product. There's quite a few others here. There are some legacy ones, right, that have been migrated into the core, product code in certain areas, but others, still come from this. So if anyone, is diving into it and wants to see examples, maybe see how certain things are done, this is another good resource.
You're on mute, Tiago.
I am. Yeah, sorry. I was saying that I shared the links on the chat. So if you are, so for anyone who wants to start, you have the developer docs, you have the Rundeck plugins on GitHub, and if I wanted to start, so what's the path forward for whoever is developing the plugins? Is it to go and develop this by using the Bootstrap project that you just shared and use Java? That's the recommended path, at least.
It is. Yeah. I think that's something, we might be able to put together a special, video on or day on, is just walk that path, sometime in the future. But it would be start with the plugin Bootstrap that Jake demonstrated. Get yourself a starter set of code, and then jump into that use case. I think that it also helps to have a good exercise ahead of time. So I think that's what we can work on some time. Maybe we'll put together a Friday happy hour coding special.
Yeah, that sounds like a great plan. Cool. Yeah, that was a lot for today. We had 5.2 was as you said, Forrest, it was like a maintenance kind of release, but yeah, you shared a lot apart from 5.2. So I hope that people watching really enjoyed it. There are a few links in the chat. Is there anything else that you would like to share before we go?
I would just reiterate what I mentioned earlier about the kind of the closed beta of the Kubernetes plugins. So if you're an existing customer and want to get your hands on those, we are eager to get feedback in their current state, because we're actively developing and testing them. We're cranking away on more plugins like that to make integrating with common technologies much easier.
Cool. Yeah, that's great. So thank you guys once again. I'm really excited about these new plugin development work that you guys are doing. Really interesting. And so, yeah, thank you so much for joining today. Well, we'll see you in a few weeks for the next release.
All right.
See you guys.
Sounds like a plan.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.